Our scripture reading today comes from the book of Genesis in the 25th chapter. The birth and youth of Esau and Jacob. These are the descendants of Isaac, Abraham's son. Abraham was the father of Isaac, and Isaac was 40 years old when he married Rebekah, daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, sister of Laban the Aramean. Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer, and his wife Rebekah conceived. The children struggled together within her. And she said, "If it is to be this way, why do I live?" So she went to inquire of the Lord, and the Lord said to her, "Two nations are in your womb, and two peoples born of you shall be divided. The one shall be stronger than the other, the elder shall serve the younger." When her time to give birth was at hand, there were twins in her womb. The first came out red, all his body like a hairy mantle, so they named him Esau. Afterward, his brother came out with his hand gripping Esau's heel, so that he was named Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. When the boys grew up, Esau was a skillful hunter, a man of the field, while Jacob was a quiet man living in tents. Isaac loved Esau because he was fond of game, but Rebekah loved Jacob. Once, when Jacob was cooking a stew, Esau came in from the field and he was famished. Esau said to Jacob, "Let me eat some of that red stuff, for I am famished." Therefore, he was called Edom. Jacob said, "First, sell me your birthright." Esau said, "I am about to die. Of what use is a birthright to me?" Jacob said, "Swear to me first." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. Then Jacob gave Esau bread and lentil stew, and he ate and drank and rose and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright. Our big question today is, why would God use a guy like Jacob, who tried to get all he could out just for himself? And here's where we get to think about something very special that God does. God uses people who are imperfect and can do great things with them. The story of Esau and Jacob is a story of two brothers. The younger one, who is out for himself and tries to get things by deceiving his brother, tricking his brother out of his birthright, and the older brother, who gets lost in the story as God's promise comes down from Abraham to Isaac and then ultimately to Jacob and not Esau. It's a story of deception. How later in the story, Jacob disguises himself as his brother and tricks their father Isaac into blessing him. It's a story of retribution. How Esau swore that after Dad died, he was going to kill his brother. It's a story of endurance, of how Jacob continued to live and follow God, even when things weren't going his way. Even when he was looking out for himself, God was looking out for him. God can do great things with imperfect people. Very early in our story here in the Bible, we see once again that imperfect people can be instruments of God's love and grace in the world. Who do you know that's imperfect? Who do you know that has flaws? Who do you say, can anything good happen but for this person? Remember the story of Esau and Jacob, that yes, God is able to work together with all of our flaws to create something good. That is exactly how grace functions in the world. God is able to look beyond our flaws, beyond our imperfections, and can use us for God's purposes. God's grace functions as a way for us to receive and let God's love flow through us. We don't deserve it. Jacob didn't deserve it. But here's the thing. God is able to work with Jacob to become a blessing and a father of all the peoples. And God is able to work with you and with me. Not because we deserve it, but because God's love is so great that it is able to use even imperfect people for God's goodness and pleasure. We don't get to hear more about the story of Esau and Jacob during confirmation this year. It's one of the lessons that sort of gets lost in the schedule as we have so much to cover in a Bible year. But here's what we need to think about. Here's what we need to imagine. How can God use us, just as we are, for God's purpose? We're very good at practicing deception. We can smile when we hurt inside. We can pretend that things are okay when they're really not. When moms or dad asks us how our day was and we say, fine, even though there's been things that have gone on that cause deep pain and hurt. Even then, God can work through us. We may harbor secret wishes to get even with somebody. Retribution. Esau had those feelings. But at the end of the day, Esau forgave Jacob for all the hurt and pain that Jacob had caused. When Jacob came back, it was Esau who welcomed him. God continues to bless Esau too in the story. And as we're starting school this week, as we're beginning a time when we just know that this year is going to be different than any other year that we've ever known, we can think about this story as one of endurance. How over years, God remained faithful to Jacob, despite all of his imperfections. Jacob found love. Jacob found himself to be blessed by God in his work. Jacob found that he was led back by God to a place that his grandparents had called home. God can do great things with imperfect people. God can do great things with you and with me. Thanks be to God.